Baseball, America's favorite pastime. Reminds us of hot dogs, Cracker Jacks, nachos with cheesy goodness smothered all over them, and foul balls whizzing past our head at 100 miles an hour, but as you can see here, it happens to be upside of his head. These are the things that we remember about baseball. And something about baseball is it's as American as it is, it has not always been so forgiving to the hearts of ethnic cultures coming to the United States. I'd like to quote Alan Bud Selig, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, who is quoted from the book, The American Game, Baseball and Ethnicity. And he says, throughout the early days of its history, baseball has attracted immigrants and members of diverse ethnic groups. For some, it was a way out of the ghettos. For others, it was a pleasant diversion from a difficult existence. And for many, the game provided a measure of acceptance and a platform on which one could stand proudly and proclaim his status as an American. Today, I want to trace the impact of increasing ethnic diversity in American baseball. First, we'll be tracing the beginning of baseball players and their changing ethnicity from 1840 to 1899. Secondly, we'll look at the segregation and integration of African Americans from 1840 to 1946. And lastly, what the color of baseball looks like from 1947 to the present day. My story will begin in 1800 when baseball was becoming an organized sport in America, shared by the likes of Civil War soldiers and immigrants migrating into America from across the oceans. Most of you might be surprised to learn that in early American baseball, ethnic cultures from countries such as Germany, Ireland, Italy, Poland, and Czechoslovakia represented the early days of American baseball. According to Frederick Ivan Campbell, whose written essay in the book, The American Game, Baseball and Ethnicity, states that in 1840s, Anglo-Americans were mostly responsible for the formation, development, and structure of American baseball, which was most likely derived from the English game called rounders. And it's no coincidence that by 1845, the American game of baseball was quickly filling up with talented players of English descent. According to Lee Allen, a historian for the National Baseball Hall of Fame, nearly half of baseball's National Association players were British-born between 1871 and 1875, with German players making up about 30%, and then Irish players making up about the rest of the 20% there. And from about 1876 to 1884, these numbers continue to flux up and down with these ethnic cultures. By 1890, Italians started to integrate into American baseball with good numbers, while Jewish and Slavic players from Poland and Czechoslovakia made up a small percentage during this time. From 1840 to 1899, few players would represent Native American ethnic cultures, and very few Mexican American players were represented in baseball at this time. And however, and unfortunately during this era, African American players were not allowed to play as it was referred to as white baseball. Asian Pacific Americans, ethnic cultures would see the same discrimination as African Americans and would not emerge into baseball until much later. So both Asian Pacific and African Americans would eventually form their own teams and play in their own leagues, and this discrimination against the ethnic cultures of color would be broken later on in the history of American baseball. Now let's shift to an era of American baseball where the exclusion of African American players was present, and a look at the color barrier being broken once and for all. I thought it was important to state, and according to the NegroLeagueBaseball.com, that in 1884 there was one African American baseball player present who played for 1 year. Unfortunately, Fleetwood Walker was cut from the Toledo Club in the American Association despite a credible performance, and Fleetwood Walker would turn out to be the only and last African American player until much later in the history of baseball. In 1890, the International League of Major League Baseball would impose a ban on African Americans. So from 1885 to 1946, African Americans would not grace the field of American organized baseball for some time. Also, according to NegroLeagueBaseball.com, African Americans put together their own teams. By 1920, formed the Negro National League and the Negro Southern League, thanks to men like Andrew Root Foster and Thomas Wilson. Ironically, integration into American organized baseball would prove to be a bittersweet ethnic victory, as the stars of Negro leagues were picked up and the rest of the players would be left looking to make a living somewhere else. Who are these stars, you might say, that were picked up? Players like Jackie Robinson, Larry Doby, and Satchel Paige helped break the color barrier and pave the way for the African American baseball players. And by the end of the 1952 Major League season, more than 150 Negro League players were integrated into American organized baseball. From yesteryear to today, the ethnic representation of American baseball has grown. Let's look at some interesting statistics on how America has stewed together a melting pot of great players that represented not only their country, but American baseball. From 1947 to the present, ethnic cultures such as African Americans, Asian Pacific Islanders, Native Americans, and Latinos have made a huge jump in numbers in the Major League Baseball system. Since the 1950s, the amount of Latino baseball players and African American baseball players have grown to what it is today. Very representative. As we see here, I have some stats here, and according to the Commissioner of Major League Baseball, by the start of the 2000 Major League Baseball, there was 198 players, or nearly 24% of all Major League players were born outside the 50 states and represented 16 different foreign countries and Puerto Rico. As you can see down here, 24% in 2000, 27, it jumped big after 4 years, so very represented, very represented here. Bud Selig, the Commissioner of Baseball, says, "Today, baseball truly is the melting pot that reflects ethnic American population as well or better than any other sport." So let's review the information and facts which were presented to you today about the impact of increasing ethnic diversity in American baseball. First, we looked at the beginning of American baseball and its roots in regards to ethnic cultures. Secondly, we learned of the segregation and integration of African Americans baseball players into organized baseball. And thirdly, we reviewed some statistics and integration of ethnic diversity in American baseball as it is today. Roger Engel, whose book The Summer Game, and was a columnist for the New Yorker in the 1960s, said, and I think this kind of fits everything together, "Baseball seems to have been invented solely for the purpose of explaining all of the things in life. It has uniquely mirrored the trends within our culture and has been associated with the American dream. Baseball has been an arena in which the mightiest struggles of our society, equal rights regardless of race, nationality, or gender, have been played out." So in closing today, we looked at the impact of ethnic diversity in American baseball, and I think it's an eye-opening story of how we as Americans should strive to integrate and grasp the different cultures that are in and around us. Not just in baseball, but in our day-to-day lives. Let's all embrace one another's way of life, one another's culture and color. Let's become living examples of diverse thinking and continue to be a part of the melting pot that is America. Let's all play ball as one. Thank you.
Sorry about the red side. Sorry about the red side.
Oh, no.
The Giants are- Sorry about the red side.
I haven't been anxious to come around.
Okay, Amanda, you want to tell us what you thought, please?
I thought that the speech was very well said, and I could tell you put a lot of work into it, and that it was very well thought out with a lot of historical information. I was a little confused on what your hook was exactly. I felt like there were too many points in the hook, and so when the thesis was finally stated, I felt like it took a while for that to happen. Your good points, though, where there's lots of interesting information, and your quotations were cited very well, but all the historical information, I didn't really hear a citation for, so I was confused about that. And it seemed very well rehearsed, but you kind of stood there and read your note cards the entire time, and I felt like you could have interacted with the audience more. And I was a little confused on the first couple slides. I felt like they had nothing to do with what you were saying, but then it kind of came back with that with the last few slides, except I felt like you didn't have to label them with the information. You could just said the information, just left the pictures. So overall, I thought it was a really good speech, though.
Okay. I like the visuals in the introduction and the attention device, so I didn't have the same problem that Amanda did, but I can see why it might be a little distracting. And I thought you had a very clear thesis statement. It was excellent, and I knew exactly where you were headed here. You've previewed the supporting content. It sounds like there are two time periods that are overlapping, the first two time periods that you're talking about. I'm not sure if that was intended or if I just misheard what the label on the second time period was. The slide where I think that Amanda was talking about, that talks about rounders, for instance, I could see that that was being related to the introduction of baseball through an ethnic group. And then there was some statistical information that talked about the groups that were early players of that game. So I did hear the information that kind of connected it to that ethnic issue that you're talking about. I heard source citations for most of the speech, so I thought you were pretty consistent on that. There were a couple of times when there were not quite as much explanation as there might have been. For instance, when you mentioned rounders, I assumed that there's a lot of similarity between the game. I think I could have used a little bit more explanation of that, because I'm not familiar with rounders, but it looked, I mean, for the diagram, it looked like it's pretty similar. But you know, that's a minor quibble. I didn't think that there was anything problematic about that, and I thought especially that you were very consistent, especially when you got to all the statistical information, the historical information, about giving us source citations on that. The transitions between the points were really sweet. They were easy to listen to. They made it clear that you were moving from one point to another. They were eloquently stated. The only thing that is at all an issue here is that I can tell that you worked really well on the language of the speech, but that means that you're really committed to the script, and you have to do a lot of reading as a consequence. And you know, if we could just get like 2 steps more toward talking to the audience and 1 step away from the script, I think that would help a little bit on the delivery. But I hate to suggest it too much because, like I said, I did think that the language that you used was really effective at doing that. So you know, if there's a way to keep that sense of language without having to write it all out word for word, that would be the ideal combination of those things. I thought all the visuals were integrated into the speech very effectively, and they highlighted points. Sometimes they didn't always add a lot of information, but they reminded us at what point we were at, and were a little bit interesting. And I thought the summary was solid, very good. And the exit, of course, is heartfelt, and I think that you're pretty effective at getting that across. Went a little long, but not a huge amount of time. And like I said, the delivery thing, the only thing that's a little bit of an issue is that you are looking at the notes quite a bit. And you've got a lot of statistical information there too, but if you could talk to people a little more, I think you would sell this a little bit more. And all the content, I think that all the content stuff is really, really solid. So you're doing a good job on that. You just need to take an extra half step. And like I said, it makes it sound like I'm being super critical. I thought you read it really well, but there's still that element where you need to connect with the audience, and that's one of those things that's just hard to do when you're doing reading. All right, thank you.